With that, welcome everybody. Good morning, Utah, and welcome to this month's NAIOP Live. We're excited to talk to Danny Walz with the RDA this month and learn more about what's going on downtown, how the skyline in this town is changing, and just really what to expect about all the activity and all the cranes and everything that's still exciting about what is Salt Lake City real estate. So just as a quick reminder to everybody tuning in, feel free during the presentation and subsequently after Danny's presentation to ask questions, make your comments through the Q&A functions and the chat functions on Zoom. Also, we will be operating the active poll questions throughout the presentation and greatly appreciate your interaction. So at any point in time when you see that screen pop up for a poll, please add your 2 cents. Also, as an added bonus and as a new feature for those of you sleuths with a keen eye, pay attention to Danny's presentation. Watch for his Easter egg. If you spot it, let me know. There's a special treat for you, as well as a special mention in next month's event. So before we get to Danny, I want to make sure that as a chapter, we mention with gratitude all of our sponsors for our chapter. Our platinum sponsor is Zions Bank. Our silver sponsors are Layton Construction, Hamilton Partners, Big D Construction, Colliers International, Mortensen, and CBRE. And then our bronze sponsors are Harris Company and Newmark Knight Frank. And with a big special thank you to our title sponsor for today's event, I want to turn the time over to Jesse Allen with GSBS to give a few comments about his firm. Jesse?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of GSBS Architects, welcome to this online event to discuss the exciting development and growth in downtown Salt Lake City. I am Jesse Allen, an architect and landscape architect at GSBS Architects. We, like many of you, are involved in projects that are shaping our downtown. Most recently, we worked on the remodel of the Mountain West Commercial Real Estate's new office on South Temple. We have some exciting adaptive reuse projects in the Granary. And over the years, we've worked on several projects directly with the Redevelopment Agency of Salt Lake City, including Regent Street Improvements Project and currently the conceptual design of Japantown. The Redevelopment Agency is a catalyst and foundational to much of the exciting development we see happening in downtown, which is really making our city more appealing and more livable. So thank you to NAIOP for hosting today's event, Danny Walz, the Chief Operating Officer at the RDA, for presenting, and Josh Caldwell from Mortensen for moderating this important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you, GSBS. Much appreciated your sponsorship. With that, we're going to turn the time over to today's highlighting speaker, which is Danny Walz. Danny is the Chief Operating Officer at Salt Lake City's Redevelopment Agency. Danny has a long history of revitalizing neighborhoods. He's been heavily involved in activating neighborhoods across the state. Prior to being the Salt Lake City RDA director, Danny was the director for the Midvale City Redevelopment Agency. Originally from Sherman Oaks, California. Don't hold that against him. He does have a bachelor's degree from the University of Utah and has deepened his roots in this community. So Danny heads up an incredible team at the city, leading the charge on some of what are some amazing projects. I think we can all agree, ultimately affecting what is going to be a forever change in the skyline of the city. And so with that, I want to turn the time over to Danny and hear what he has to say about what's happening in Salt Lake City.
Thanks, Josh, and thanks, NAIOP, for the opportunity to be here. I appreciate Josh not hounding me too much about my LA roots, although I will take a moment to brag a little bit that this is a good week and good month for sports teams from Los Angeles. So if that loses some viewers right off the bat, I apologize, but we're just putting that on the table. And thanks Jesse and GSBS for sponsoring. We have the honor and the privilege of working not just with GSBS, but Jesse specifically. So really appreciate the opportunity and that description, Jesse. And I had the ability to negotiate with Jesse that every time today I say GSBS, I get $1 off my next scheduled fee of any work that they do for us. So That's $1, Jesse, that I get to take off right off the bat. And then Josh, just to build on what you said before I begin presenting, I really want to thank the RDA staff, specifically Amanda Greenland, who has put this information together and does an amazing job of communicating what the RDA does. And these projects wouldn't happen without our staff. And just to segue into the presentation, I also want to thank all the developers that we work with. Obviously, the RDA takes a lot of pride in what we do, and we wouldn't be able to do it if not for our developer partners who are actually building the projects and sharing our vision of what we'd like to see the downtown become. So thank you to them as we go through this. They're the ones really making these changes happen, and we appreciate the opportunity just to have a part in their projects as we transition downtown in Salt Lake City. So with that, I will start sharing my screen and see if we can get this thing to work. We're good, I assume, so we'll get going into it. I think we're gonna start off with one of our first quiz questions, which is really just, how well do you really know Salt Lake City's redevelopment agency? So I think as that pops up, we'll give everyone an opportunity to, right off the bat, see how well you know who we are and what we do.
Danny, we might test your ability to pivot here and keep moving forward, as we may have a couple of technical difficulties. Continue with that, and we'll pull up the poll question as soon as it's available.
Okay, not a problem. That works. So I thought it was important to start with our mission statement. When I came into the agency a few years ago, it was very important for us to update this mission statement. We had not done that since 1996. And our old mission statement was a horrible combination of state legislation language, a mix of horrible stereo instructions, as well as what appeared to be a really bad to-do list. So we took it very important to update this mission statement and really figure out where we wanted to take the agency into the future and into the next 25 to 50 years. And our focus, as you can see with this, is really based on neighborhoods and building communities, being strategic with the development projects that we do, and blending that with providing housing, commercial and economic development, as well as community space through infrastructure and open space. And so this was what was the result of that. And we take this very seriously. We've integrated that into what we label as 3 core values. And the easiest way to describe these are people, places, profit, and performance. But that, I'm told by Amanda, is not really a good tagline. So we broke these out more specifically into what is our community impact, which focuses on people and where they are and how they integrate with the neighborhood. The neighborhood itself and the larger places that encompasses, and the vibrancy. And then the economic growth. And so within the community impact, you can see that those are the parts of the project that really deal with affordable housing, transit, public art, and what makes that an impact on that neighborhood. And then the places deal more with the built environment, not just the development itself, but sensitive to the surrounding area as far as the materials, the design, walkability, and how it fits within that neighborhood. And then the economic growth is where we look at how this works with the developer and the leverage, targeting our resources and getting a return on our dollars, while at the same time trying to carry out the city's goals for economic development. Each of these categories are what we label benchmarks. And when we look at participating in a project or what a project brings to the table, we are building a scoring system of which we can take a look at these with each project. Not every project is going to hit these, but like I said, these are our benchmarks for really starting to look at how many of these does a project integrate, and does it make it worth participating or doing from an agency standpoint. Moving on to our project area map. This is a list of all the project areas. If you're familiar with redevelopment agencies and you understand that we are limited to doing our work within target areas of the city, and these are established through a legislative process. It's fairly lengthy and detailed as far as justifying what we can do within a neighborhood. And then there's a term to all of these, usually anywhere between 20 to 25 years. So as a child, and I used to love to play the game Risk. And so if there's any Risk fans on this call, then you would think that I'm winning in terms of taking over the city. But it's important to note that a lot of these are in different phases of their life as far as the project areas. Some project areas are very limited in what their scope. So for instance, the North Temple Viaduct project was one that was formed entirely just to help service a bond to rebuild the North Temple Viaduct bridge over the tracks and heavy rail line. Some project areas are near expiration and that we have actually stopped collecting money for, but we still have several developments within those project areas that we're wrapping up. And so even though this looks a little massive in terms of its scope, there's different levels of where these projects are in their lifespan and what our participation is in those areas. So we wanted to focus on downtown. We have a few projects that are on the periphery of downtown, and we've broken that up into projects that are currently underway and ones that are still in the process of coming soon. So taking a look at the downtown area, we've highlighted some of the projects we're going to talk about today. You can see at the top that with Diamond Rail and Harvest at Marmalade, those are a little bit outside of the downtown area. The red boundary that you see here is what is considered the Downtown Alliance's boundary for their activation of downtown. But as we talk about some of these projects, I think everyone on this will realize that that downtown area is different depending on who you are, what your scope is, and how you want to define it. Whether you're looking at the true core of downtown, surrounding Main Street, whether you're looking at an area like this of what the Downtown Alliance considers for activation, or whether we're looking at projects and developments that are now expanding that downtown boundary. So we kind of take a look at it as this larger area. And so, but we do have some projects that are still on the outside of that boundary. I am told that we have the quiz ready to go for the second question. It's just popped up. So here you go. All right. It looks like 58% of you got the answer right. It is 7 projects that we're currently underway in downtown and downtown adjacent. So either that or everyone was able to count the dots really fast and they were paying attention. So either way, kudos to you. Okay, going
I think
through
lost most of us when you said LA sports, so.
Okay. All right, so some of those projects we'll get into real fast, starting with Paper Box Lofts. Paper Box Lofts is a project that's over on the block between 2nd and 3rd South and 3rd and 4th West. It essentially bisects the block running east to west. This is a great project that PEG Development and Clearwater have joined together to do. It was by nature a market rate project, and with agency participation, we were able to get 39 affordable units in the project. It's going to be really cool in the sense that it provides a mid-block walkway and pocket park through the center of the block. And then I believe it is still on track to be the first project with the car stacker parking system. So you'll go and get your parked car out of a vending machine. And this is estimated to be completed in 2021.
Hey, Danny, real quick, just out of curiosity, can you explain just, I know it's not the entirety of the development, but what exactly does a car stacker in a development like this look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really, you pull your car into what arguably would look like a service bay lift in a garage, and it sits on a platform, and you get out of your car, you get your stuff out, and you step away, and then the machine takes it and parks it in a stacking pattern. So you don't have a true parking structure in terms of stalls and ramps and drive lanes, as much as you just have the ability to shorten the amount of space that uses by way of the stacker system, taking your car and then moving that. And you can then, when you are ready to leave, queue up your car through an app and indicate that you're ready to come pick up your car. And so as you're walking from your unit to the garage, the system will get your car ready and bring it down for you and drop it off at ground level so you can get in and drive out of it.
Awesome. So it's like a giant jukebox for vehicles.
Yeah. Cool. That was a horrible explanation, but clearly I'm not a car stacker salesperson. But
we'll give you a pass.
I'm not selling any units today. So next project is the Jackson Apartments. That's over on 2nd South. This is a project with Hampstead that is coming through and doing a renovation of these units and converting them into 80 affordable units for seniors that are going to be at 60% of area median income. They are restoring the historic facade and doing major upgrades and replacements throughout it, as well as converting 4 of the units for ADA. And this is a great project because it is transit adjacent, close to a bus stop, and just 1/3 of a mile from a track stop. Japantown Visioning, this is one of the projects that we have the opportunity to work with GSBS. And so we have commissioned them to come in and help us do a visioning plan for this area. If you're familiar with Japantown, it was impacted greatly with the development of the Salt Palace Convention Center. And then as we were working with the developers on the West Quarter project, it was really important to the mayor and our board of directors, the city council, to try to offset that impact of not just the convention center, but that development in a way that we could do a visioning plan for the Japanese American community and the 2 churches there to help provide some streetscape and development improvements that really bring back that neighborhood and that sense of place for that community. So this is a plan that will highlight some of those improvements and lay out some cost estimates and timing and resources available. And then we will work to hopefully bring that to fruition. The Maya is a project on 400 South. It's part of what was originally called the Exchange development with Domain and Give Partners. The RDA was involved in this building of that development with some funding to help make the project affordable. It's 126 micro unit apartments, and the project includes ground floor space for incubation pop-ups, as well as co-working and retail space that's available to the residents. So this is underway right now and is getting pretty near completion. Central Station Apartments is another affordable housing project over on 2nd South being done by Gardner Batt. It is 65 affordable units at or below 50% AMI. And then there's an infusion of 13 market rate units as well. Diamond Rail Apartments is a project just a little bit outside of downtown on 3rd North. It's an affordable housing project that also includes some market rate units. There is a ground floor commercial space intended for local businesses. They have really done a good job of providing amenities in this development. And this is expected to break ground by the end of the year or early 2021.
Hey, Danny, as you're going through, just a quick question. Do you have any sense for, obviously not all of them will have the same level of features, but if there is a sustainability feature or effort pertaining to one of these developments, can you give us any highlights on what those look like as well?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. A lot of those are undefined at this point, but I think there's 1 or 2 we have in the slide deck that I can speak specifically to.
Awesome.
Harvest at Marmalade is a project that's under construction, pretty good sized project on 3rd West, $60 million that the agency sold the land. 3 buildings with structured parking, primarily market rate housing. There is some small commercial space, as well as there is an open space in the center of the block that will kind of tie in this project with the Marmalade Library, as well as some of the projects to the east that were developed. And this is a project, again, by Clearwater Homes that we've partnered with, and they're looking at a 2021 completion. And I think we have another quiz question at this point.
How many residential units are currently underway as part of these projects? See who is paying attention.
See who did all that math.
Yeah.
All right. Well, apparently a lot of people are paying attention. The correct answer is 823. And I think this is a good point to also bring up that since 2010, the Redevelopment Agency itself has been responsible for 2,489 units with a participation just by the agency of $65 million. So over 10 years, we've been involved in a significant amount of residential, primarily affordable projects. That's $65 million. So good point to bring that up. Okay, so we're going to shift now and include some projects that are currently underway or coming along, in addition to those that are underway. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I'm going through it. The first project we'll highlight is everyone's favorite hole in the ground on State Street. What was formerly the steel structure and failed construction project. This is a project that the agency went and bought back the property. We then marketed it and selected BRINSHORE Development out of Illinois to come in and do a mixed use income project. This has a significant amount of agency participation in it. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed this quiz. I apologize, I wasn't paying attention to my notes.
Let's see if the audience is paying more attention than Danny was.
Yeah, I wasn't.
How many RDA projects are coming along in downtown and downtown adjacent Salt Lake City?
Well, that's a pretty good split there, but 50%, the majority did get it correct, 7.
I feel like those of us that answered 5 weren't paying attention to the first one. But there again, consider our audience.
I'll chalk it up to the dots on the map where it may be hard to see between the different shades of green. So we'll make everyone a winner here.
Just saying, they were written by a guy from LA, so they're the source.
Math is hard. It's hard to count all those championships. So just to wrap up State Street, this is a project that'll be a mixed use, mixed income project. 152 of the 190 units will be affordable. This project we're really proud of because the AMI ranges everywhere from 20 to 80% AMI, and the unit types range from studio apartments to 4-bedroom units. It also includes a mid-block walkway back to Floral and Edison Street, as well as the preservation of the Kramer building back in the mid-block area. So we are hoping to close on this disposition by the end of the year, and BRINSHORE is looking to start construction in spring. Utah Theater, if any of our friends from HINES Development are on this, they're probably cringing because this we know is an older rendering of the project, but we wanted to at least provide this as far as the scale and the scope of this project as it replaced the former Utah Theater. This will be a residential mixed-use tower in the pure heart of downtown. It'll include a mid-block walkway into a public open space in the middle of the block, as well as activation along Main Street. And affordable housing. One of the components of offering this property is that 10% of the units will be rented as affordable, 60 to 80% area median income. And the agency is in the last stages of finalizing what was a very thorough documentation and archiving project of the former theater in its current state, as well as the history of the property and the building. And all of that will be archived with the State Historic Preservation Office and hosted by the Marriott Library at the university for online. It's a pretty amazing process that I think everyone will appreciate, that how we've documented that building and what state it was in.
Hey, Danny, can we take a quick pause? And I know that this, so I need you to take this question in the spirit with which it's intended, not to turn this into a conversation about multifamily or affordable housing specifically, but as we're looking at this tower and the impact and the location, and of course, the encumbrances with the theater, can you just explain maybe what, from the RDA standpoint, this affordability, give us an idea of what that looks like to Salt Lake City and how that impacts what's happening here with this development?
Yeah, that is an extremely complicated question, but I'll give you a simple answer. I mean, for us as an agency, we recognize that if we were going to make the tough decision to not be able to preserve the theater, it was important for us to try to understand what we could then infuse in the project to then make it a benefit, not just to the downtown area, but the community. And affordable housing was a big piece of that, along with the connectivity and the mid-block walkway and the public space. But the affordable housing was especially important because we had at the time the mayor and several council members who, were determined that if we were going to provide the opportunity to build market rate housing, which I think everyone can appreciate that at this location downtown and on Main Street is going to be, slightly more expensive than other areas of the city, that if we were going to provide that housing, that we wanted to make sure that that housing was available to people at all income levels or a range of income levels, as well as a range of unit type. And so that was a goal that we set, and that was a restriction we put on the development as we negotiated with HINES. And it's an extremely expensive decision, not just from a monetary standpoint, but it also impacts how the developer and that management company continue to manage and run the property. If you're not an affordable housing developer, then imposing affordability requirements and monitoring on a project brings in a whole nother level of compliance and regulation and monitoring, and that has an impact on not just your bottom line, but how you support your residents. And so we recognize that is an impact on development and developers who are not necessarily looking to do that. And so that's why we put that as a public benefit and how we justified the land write down to provide for that opportunity. So, but we feel it's extremely important that in the core of your downtown, you have housing that is available to all levels of workers and residents and people coming and wanting to be in that core downtown, that it should not just be available to people who can afford those higher rents.
Awesome. And sorry for putting you on the spot on that one. I certainly don't mean to suggest that the RDA is pioneering, this concept by any stretch, but it is an important topic that I think is of high interest to a lot of people in this town, and figuring out the best way to navigate, what that product looks like with that ratio and how that impacts overall developments is a big question these days. So thank you for pausing on that.
No, I appreciate that segue. Thank you. Union Station Hotel. This is a project with the Athens Hotel Development Group. They're looking to build a boutique hotel project. The agency has provided a loan as they are working to get the rest of their financing in place. This would be about 225 keys with some meeting and event space, but more importantly, it focuses on the adaptive reuse of the Union Pacific Station building into the lobby and the grand hall for the hotel. So as far as sustainability and adaptive reuse, this is probably one of the marquee projects that would support that and really provide an amazing reuse of this building and pivot it into something that can be open to the public and active and people can come and have a reason to come into. The Olive is a project that's under construction right now, just north of Pioneer Park. This is one of the few ownership condominium developments happening in and around the downtown. And so this was a focus for the agency to participate in and try to provide that opportunity for those who want to own downtown. Unit prices range from 270 to 570,000, and it is underway. Regent Street project. This is just on the south end of Regent Street, just right across the street from the Gallivan Center and west of everyone's favorite Carl's Jr. restaurant. The agency owns a parcel right in the middle of where that star is. We are under contract with Dakota Pacific, who owns the property to the north and south of us, to do a project and have them develop that. They are finalizing their financing package for it, as well as working through some site condition issues. And those issues will determine to what extent it is a mix between a hotel development and a residential project with shared amenities between the two. And then that'll determine the height of the project as well, as how much they are able to incorporate those and build on the property.
Danny, does yours or Dakota Pacific's ownership include the existing structure right there on the north end, just south of that parking structure? I forget what the building. It's a vacant office.
Yeah, building. that's under Dakota Pacific ownership now. That was one of the pieces that they were acquiring as far as since we've been under contract, they have been working to acquire that, and they have since closed on it.
Gotcha.
That's the Miller Tune building.
Right.
Jumping a little bit outside of downtown, but we wanted to highlight this. And Josh, I appreciate the softball pitch to talk about sustainability, because this is one of the projects that is really trying to incorporate those measures within the development. This is on 15th West and North Temple, right across the street from where Rocky Mountain Power headquarters are. This is a transit-oriented mixed-use project. It's literally 75 feet away from that transit stop that you can see at the bottom of the screen. Our board charged us with buying what was formerly a motel and putting it out for housing development. And they took a different spin on this one, where given the neighborhood and the housing levels within the neighborhood, they wanted us to be more heavy on the market rate units and have less residential units. The irony in that is some of the affordability levels right now determined by HUD are right at what the market rents are for the neighborhood. And so we're really looking at locking in those rates more long-term than necessarily providing housing affordability that isn't there yet. So a little bit different of a twist for us on this one, but it is a mixed-use project that'll have retail oriented towards the tracks. They're looking at providing a community use in the form of a daycare, as well as additional retail space, rooftop gardens, beehive, really doing a great job of the sustainability aspect on this one. So developers awaiting a decision on the 9% tax credits by the end of the year. And then we're hoping to kind of put the other pieces of this project together as far as financing and partners and what the final development scope will look like. West Montrose, jumping out of the granary area, again, just on the edge of downtown. This is the property just under 2 acres that the agency owns. We unfortunately recently had to recall our request for proposals on this because we had some confusion as far as what the easements were going through the property, both the West Montrose portion and the East Montrose portion. And that was a major component of our offering as far as if the developers, what extent they would preserve that mid-block walkway and improve it. So we're in the process of finalizing that, and we should be putting this back out on the market for multifamily mixed-use development in the next couple months. Okay, specifically in downtown, we wanted to mention 2 things real quick. The RDA was significant catalyst for the Eccles Theater development, both in terms of buying the property and developing the theater itself. We continue to be a partial owner in that facility, and we have it under contract with Salt Lake County to operate and manage it. And it's an amazing time to be in the business of owning a theater with COVID. Fortunately for us, we as we built this project in the budget, we built a significant amount of reserves and a waterfalling effect of the funding that has helped kind of guide us and carry us through COVID. And we are anxiously targeting a return of Broadway performances to the theater come July, if everything goes well. So, but that is a major piece of downtown that we continue to have an active role in.
So Danny, two questions. One, obviously, I don't expect a forecast of COVID, but do you have, or does Eccles have any sort of an idea what that actual postponement looks like in terms of the time frame? And two, can you give, based on COVID rescheduling or postponements, discounts to those of us looking for season?
Absolutely not to that second question. I know there are some events that they have been trying to reschedule, and I can't speak to the status of all of those as far as what's been able to be rescheduled or postponed versus which ones are just have been canceled outright. And I think they're still working through that. But as far as looking forward, I can tell you that the county is targeting the reopening of the Broadway performances in July. And they're going to bring it on with a bang. I believe Hamilton is the first major production that would be coming through. And between now and then, they are still trying to work through at what level can they do other events and concerts and potentially do those in a way that aren't necessarily at full capacity, but can still be open to the public and have performances there. So they factored that into their budget for this year and are hoping that as we come out of winter, that can start ramping up towards that July reopening.
Awesome.
So, and in the same vein of performance arts, the agency is also the owner of the Gallivan Center. We own the parking structure below it and lease that to Boyer as part of the One Utah Center development, but we own the plaza on top. And then we have recently assumed management and programming of that, which was previously being done by the city's public services department. That is now all entirely within the agency, and we work with the other owners on the block as part of the CC&Rs that govern both the plaza and the programming. And Galvin has been trying to pivot through COVID. Obviously, they're not hosting live events, but they are doing an amazing job of streaming concerts, and the Excellence in Community Concert Series has been wildly successful with over 2 million views of those streamed events. And those happen on Wednesday and Saturday nights. And then just for those who are wondering what we've done as part of COVID-19, obviously we've talked a lot about the projects that have managed to continue to go through with COVID happening, as well as those that maybe have been slightly delayed. But agency, as part of the property we own and the tenants we have waived the lease for those tenants to help carry them through COVID. And additionally, we have deferred loan payments and pushed those to the end of the terms to carry everyone through COVID as far as not having to make those payments. So we are trying to do a small part of keeping businesses open. And then I just wanted to touch on public art, which is something that we take a lot of pride in within the redevelopment agency and been involved in a lot of projects. Art for Hope is one that is about to be revealed in a couple of weeks. This is a commission that we did through COVID to help local artists. We've selected over 40 images that will be printed on 3-foot by 3-foot tiles and grouped together and placed on agency properties within the downtown, North Temple, and at our Sugar House property. And the idea was really just to provide, messages of hope and resilience and recovery as we are again through COVID. And more importantly, during this time, we've updated our art policy, which will continue to help drive our involvement in public art, from everything on property we sell and develop to loans that we do public art projects like this that we manage and take on ourselves, or those that we partner with the city's art council to do together. So public art is something that we really feel is important to the fabric of the community. And then finally, we just say thank you again to everyone. We're still open for business. We're still here for anyone who wants to talk development. We've got a lot going on, but we always like to hear from everyone of what's going on downtown and development wise. and look forward to continuing to help in the recovery of downtown and Salt Lake City coming out of COVID.
Awesome. Danny, thank you, and thanks to your team. I mean, this was really informative and I think interesting to a lot of people. But you're not off the hook yet because we've got like 18 minutes left of your time. So we do have some questions. And by the way, I would like to just make sure everybody in the audience knows, if you do have a question, please leave it in either the Q&A or the chat function of Zoom. I'm going to try my best to get to as many of those as we can. And Danny, I have some questions. We also have some audience questions. So I'm going to try and mix them up a little bit, just to keep you on your toes and, pepper you with as many as we can. I do have to just mention for the record, I'm disappointed in the amount of LA support that's coming through. I'm looking at you, Rhonda, by the way. So thanks for that. I feel like there should be more Utah folks from Utah, but there's a lot of LA people apparently. Danny, of all of these, and granted, this is a simple but also an incredibly loaded question, so feel free to answer how you want to, but which project has been the most challenging of those that you mentioned today from an RDA standpoint?
It's funny, we sometimes feel all of our projects are challenging because that's what our role is, to come in and help some of those projects that either have gap financing or challenges in them to see them through fruition. But I think for us, I'd say it's probably a toss-up between 255 South State and the Utah Theater project. 255 South State, just because that previous project stalled and the property sat for so long as an eyesore, and that was challenging to go and recapture that property and then figure out to what extent we could put it back out on the market. And one of the things we did when we reoffered the property was we preserved the requirements that were on the previous project as far as the affordability and those income levels, so that Olin Walker would not have to pay the money back to the federal government that they commissioned to that project. And so we preserved that, and that was a huge impact on the scope of the project and the affordability requirements. So that made it very challenging, along with the fact of how do you deal with the hole in the ground that's 2 stories deep and a half crumbling concrete and steel structure that had to be removed. And so we're still dealing with that challenge as far as how the next developer is going to redevelop that and what they're going to do, but that's been a challenge. And then Utah Theater, I think everyone can recognize that anytime you have to make a decision on whether you're going to preserve a building or demolish it is never popular or easy. And so that was a challenge to get through, both from the side of what we felt we had done as far as the due diligence and what the community outreach was. And I just want to put out a huge thank you to HINES Development for their patience with us as we've done that. But we're excited to finally get to a point where we're talking about the next level of that project and seeing that happen.
So follow up to that, and just if you could, without sharing any of the secret sauce or secret formula, can you elaborate really quickly, just high level, on when you're when you're engaging with a developer on, especially I'm thinking of the 255 South State project, and you guys put that out to market, what does that look like in terms of how you select, in this case, BRINSHORE, but when you're looking for a partner on, a selection like that, what does your typical formula look like?
Yeah, I wish we had a formula. I wish there was a recipe for that, but it's different for every project. And so something like that on 255 South State, that actually started when we first came up with the idea of walking across to the courthouse and buying it out of auction. That in order to just get the support of the public officials to do that, everyone right away said, we're only doing this if it's affordable or if we preserve this. And so we walked over with a set of rules, knowing that whatever price we paid on that property, we were going to have to infuse those. And so right off the bat, that started. And then when we were successful in buying it and we started figuring out how we were going to put it out, is when the other requirements come about as part of both our internal review as well as what we feel is important to downtown and the surrounding stakeholders and property owners. And that's where you start, outlining of, the importance of that mid-block walkway and connecting it to those businesses there, the preservation of the Kramer House. What level of first floor activation are we going to require? What's the mix of housing and units that preserve everything? So that is a process we do a lot internally. We do it with our elected officials so that we have their support to do the project. And then we try to do it in a way that recognizes the market demands and sensitivities of what those requirements may do on the pro forma and construction budget for the project. And on that one, we put it out as a request for qualifications because we wanted to try to find a developer who would work with us as we continue to hash those out, because we knew we didn't have all the answers right off the bat. Sure.
Okay. Pivoting to a couple of the audience questions. So speaking of the 255, this is a great segue. Is there a timeline for what that project looks like for a deliverable?
For 255 South State?
Yeah.
They will hopefully start construction this spring. Like I said, we're looking to close by the end of the year, and that will include their final construction bids and all of their financing. So they will be ready to, I was going to say break ground, but there's already a hole in the ground. So they'll be ready to start construction of building it out. And they have a 24-month timeline for completing the 2 towers.
Good to know. Next question, with so many residential units currently under construction, is there any concern from you or from the city for oversaturation?
I would love to hear that our housing market was oversaturated overall, but I think to answer your question within the context of downtown, I think is a different animal altogether. And I think it depends on, what those certain segments of the market are that you're targeting. I think there's probably an understanding that there might be a cap or limit on how many, high-end housing units the downtown can support, but I don't know if anyone really has that answer. But I think everyone's kind of looking at that as part of their project. But for us, it's more important that we try to target a good mix of housing, both in terms of unit type and size and affordability, so that, we're not just seeing projects that are entirely micro units or 1 bedroom, that we're trying to encourage 2 or 3 plus bedroom units, that we're trying to find that mix between rental and ownership. Trying to do ownership downtown has been extremely challenging. And so we've been trying to find ways to encourage that. And then what is the mix of the residents we want to see or that we think downtown needs between families and young professionals and those now that might be working from home and not necessarily have to have that downtown residence to be close to work, but maybe just want to be downtown for the activation. So I think it's really, I don't think there's an oversaturation as long as you take that into consideration and target, different areas of that mix.
Sure. So you mentioned micro units, just as a brief for those of us not as familiar, what are the square foot sizes that, like, what does a micro unit look like?
It's anywhere from about 500 to 700 square feet, if not smaller, depending on if they are, more of your SRO traditional affordable units, or if they're more just, super small studio units. And there's a lot of interest in micro units, both from an affordability standpoint, as well as, just the market itself, whether that's, students or people who are just wanting to have a unit downtown for convenience.
Which was my next question, is generally what is the appetite in a urban core setting versus maybe a on campus or adjacent to campus type of setting for student housing, and if you had a sense for that?
I don't know if I can answer that, but I do know in conversations with, the university and others that, they are seeing a lot of those smaller unit type developments being occupied and eaten up by students who want to have the proximity to downtown, but still be close enough to transit to get up to the U.
Which is still, I mean, as far as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, this is still a part of the overall concept of what is affordable housing and how, there seems to be, again, from my vantage point, I think others as well, that there's kind of a misconception of what affordable housing looks like, how, physically those are defined, and ultimately what the definition, the appetite, and the overall scope for this city and this state means from an affordability standpoint?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's always good to clarify that, affordable housing isn't low income housing, that there's a huge spectrum of affordability from, the lower area median income levels that might be at that point where you're really trying to protect people from falling into homelessness, to those that are at your 60 to 80% area median income that is your workforce downtown and or your students. And so the people that are, working at the HAMEs downtown or, in the hospitals or, public service, that 60 to 80% of AMI is not low income as much as that is just, based on what their salary is and what they can afford. And it provides them an opportunity to not have to seek housing, far away from the downtown core of where they may be working.
Sure. Okay. I don't want to turn this into a multifamily or affordable housing conversation. So kind of pivoting, is the RDA pushing the city council to allow the demolition of vacant buildings, which is creating significant blight throughout the city, especially North Temple?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I don't know if I would say supporting. I think we all recognize that sometimes cities are too quick to allow buildings to be demolished, and you could lose the opportunity to preserve some really unique and interesting buildings. So I think it's always been assumed that it's important to have a reuse plan and that you're not just losing that opportunity out of convenience, while at the same time, I will say that the existing demolition ordinance has been a challenge, especially for the agency, because we have been an owner of a lot of properties that we have had to maintain and keep boarded up, and security becomes an issue. So I think overall, we would definitely support a process that streamlines that, application process and moves it closer to development. And generally speaking, as my personal opinion, I would much rather have the opportunity to look at vacant structures than boarded up properties that are being broken into, vandalized, and are a risk for public health. So I think as long as you do it in a way that balances those efforts, makes sense. But it's ridiculous that it could take up to a year to get a demolition permit. That absolutely, I think everyone agrees, needs to be fixed.
I think most people in this
I can just hear everyone's heads nodding.
You swell a head.
Yeah.
So next question, is the RDA anticipating any future funding challenges due mostly to COVID and revenue that may affect the future pace of your projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to say that. I think, that depends on the industry. I mean, we have two projects right now that have a hotel component to them. We absolutely know that those are not, able to get financing as easily through COVID as they were before. I think the developers have done a great job of looking at the long-term game. And I think everyone recognizes that industry will probably rebound by the time, those projects are open, but that is a challenge to get that financing. So those projects, we definitely anticipate an impact. Pretty much all of our projects that were underway have either been able to continue to move through construction or have sped up because of some, external conditions with COVID. Ourselves as an agency, we were able to close 3 more loans within the first 2 months of COVID. So those projects and developers were still eager to get underway and get going. But to say that we haven't had some projects impacted by COVID and our funding, we definitely are anticipating having huge impacts.
Okay, so we are a couple of minutes from time, so I'm going to try and get as many of these in as I possibly can. If you had to name one of the projects that the RDA is currently working on, what do you think would be the most impactful to Salt Lake City? And how you answer that is going to be held in perpetuity in the logs of the state. So
that's like asking which one of my kids I love more.
I know.
That's just not fair.
You have to name somebody.
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer is to say all of them, because I'd like to think that with all of them, we've done different pieces of what the neighborhood and downtown needs. I'd probably point to the Utah Theater and 255 South State as most impactful, just because they really are in the heart of downtown and are bringing things into the downtown that I think everyone is prioritized and wants to see happen.
Okay. Thank you. Next question. What are the RDA's 5-year goals for development and projects in this town?
I think That's why we started with our mission statement and value and goals, because I think as we look at the agency, we really see ourselves as wanting to build neighborhoods and communities. We want to build the cool places that people want to come and live. And we think that's what Salt Lake City can offer and provide more than any other city or area in the county and the state. We have a level of amenities that no one else has. And so we really want to find and participate in projects that support that, not just cookie cutter developments, but something that really wants to infuse some public benefits, a reason for the community to be engaged with the project, and not just a static development that only benefits either its tenants or residents directly, but something that really, raises the bar to a higher level of a marquee project. And so our 5-year plan really is just trying to position our funding and participation to highlight those type of projects that really are something that when people see it and they understand that we have money in it, they can see what our money and benefit went to, that it wasn't just a standalone project.
Gotcha. Okay. So 2 questions in 2 minutes. First one, what type of developments do you think Salt Lake City needs more of or less of over the next few years? That's question 1. And then I'll follow up with question 2.
Okay. Real quick answer. I think we need to look at tech and healthcare innovation organizations and that type of use to bring those jobs in, to bring those residents in, support that with not just the physical office space or business space, but also the housing that those employees want to work in to stay downtown. And then the activities and amenities as far as entertainment, retail, and bars and restaurants that they want to support.
Excellent. Last question, and then we'll let you off the hook. You've got an audience full of NAIOP, of course, members and or associates, and that mostly means real estate, right? So developers, bankers, architects, contractors, brokers, you name it. Anybody who touches real estate typically is in your audience today. How can this audience and this real estate industry best support the RDA, its efforts, its projects, and how you see your progress moving forward?
I would educate us, communicate with us. Our job is to try to bring development to the areas of the city that haven't seen the market develop it. And in areas where the market's going crazy, how do we infuse public benefit and community impact level development in those areas? And the good news is we're government, so we're extremely nimble and educated on all things. No, that was a joke, everyone. That was being sarcastic. We don't have a pulse on the market or the financing. Yeah. We recognize real estate and developers are driven primarily by profit, but we have a responsibility, all of us, to build something for the community. And at the end of the day, we as an agency want to solve problems. And those problems are what you as developers are seeing. And we want to communicate with you and be informed by you, the community, as to how we can help see our vision and goals come to fruition through those projects. And that happens with telling us what the challenges are, telling us where your gaps are in financing, telling us what we as a city can either stop doing or start doing better. And then specifically as an agency, how can we help participate in those projects to come to that, mutual decision of providing something really cool for the community. So we're tough but fair, we're reasonable, and we want to be informed so that we can continue to do our job. We don't want to be a blockade as much as we want to be a solution. So we can only do that if you as the development community are telling us what those challenges are and what the hurdles are that we all need to get over to build a better city.
Which ultimately means we represent real estate from every discipline that ultimately would be involved in real estate. And every one of those disciplines has a particular avenue that could potentially be of use or at least of genuine relevance to the RDA. So conversations with the RDA are open and welcome, and that conduit should be unobstructed, is what I'm hearing.
Well, yeah. I mean, Josh, you're the perfect example of that. I met you in the cafe in our building, and we couldn't break away from that conversation, right? And so I think that's where we really appreciate hearing that. We love hearing what's going on and what people want to do and how we can help to get it done. And sometimes that's just to talk through things and provide advice or input.
Absolutely. Well, okay. Thanks again for your time. We are at time. We're actually just slightly over time. I will say to those of you who are still tuned in, a number of questions have come in asking whether or not we could have access to Danny's slides. I will say from the NAIOP standpoint, this presentation and the recording of this event will be accessible through NAIOP Utah website. Danny, can you say whether or not that's accessible via individual requests or even through the RDA?
Yeah, we're happy to provide that. We'll give it to you guys and you can distribute it. And I just left a note in the chat. I'm happy to talk to anyone on the phone, email, whatever, for anyone who has questions we didn't get to. Would love to do that. So we'll make it all available.
Perfect. Thanks again, Danny and the RDA and your entire team. We certainly appreciate everything you're doing, not just for this presentation, but for the Salt Lake community. Thanks everyone who's tuned in today. Apologize if we weren't able to get to your questions. There were a lot that came in, and certainly I think Danny and the RDA have a lot more that they could talk about. So feel free to send them to us at NAIOP or to Danny directly. Especially the criticism, send those strictly to Danny. Any complaints you have can go to the RDA, but we do appreciate your time and certainly look forward to everything the RDA is doing in this town. So thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Awesome. With that, I'll bid you all adieu. Have a good day and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.